What happens when a populace becomes scared of their protectors and their defenders? And that's an intense question to start the week with because, of course, we see it in our own world. I'm not to get out to talk about politics or anything like that on this channel, but when we, look at the world and we see maybe some incidents with police or military, whether it's, at home or abroad across the world, there's just this built-in uneasiness because I think all of us collectively, our gut reaction is the defenders becoming the villains is a terrifying notion. And it's why it's so appalling when we see it in the news and that kind of stuff. Now, like I said, I'm not getting into the real world stuff, but the reason this question is important is because today's topic is going to kind of glide along that issue, but of course it's transposed in a Age of Sigmar fantasy style, taken to 11 and all this kinds of stuff, and which honestly, to me, is the best kind of fantasy. It allows us to kind of work through real life things, but in the context of a fictional environment. Hello everybody, my name is Doug with 2+ Tough, and today we are talking, of course, about the Knights Excelsior, which, if you didn't know, is actually my Stormhost that I have been painting and building for most of the last quarter. Pretty much since, I think, around midpoint of 2021, maybe the last quarter of it, something like that. But I'm working on it now, and I'm having an absolute blast. I'll admit, I chose them because I've always wanted to try a white armor scheme, and I thought it was going to be really difficult, but it turns out it's simple and I absolutely love it. And so I was like, oh, this is the best. But one of the things that drew me to the Knights Excelsior from a lore perspective is they hardcore hammer on that question. What happens when the defenders become the thing that the population that they're defending is scared of? And so what we're going to do here is back up just a hot second, talk about the Knights Excelsior from a top-down perspective, and then kind of go into why they, above all other Stormhosts, beg that question. So if you don't know or are new to Age of Sigmar or Stormcast Eternals in general, basically, kind of like how they do with Space Marines, they have all different chapters and color schemes. A Stormhost is the same thing for Stormcast Eternals. The picturesque ones are the Golden Boys, the Hammers of Sigmar on all the front pages of the books. But of course there are others, and the ones that have the gleaming white armor are the Knights Excelsior. All Stormhosts are basically collections of souls of mortals that share something in common. So, for example, the Hallowed Knights, these are people who are, bastions of faith and devotion, and so they have rituals and war cries and all these things that are just built around faith, devotion, particularly I would say a religious devotion, and that's just kind of built into their mythos and their personality and that kind of stuff. Well, for the Knights Excelsior, rather than being a religious focus, it's this idea of unity. It's unity with a black and white world perspective. Now, on the surface, you would say, that's fantastic, right? Who wouldn't want to be on the same page as these guys, right? If you're walking down a dark alley, you want a Knight Excelsior on your side walking with you because no one's going to mess with you, right? We're all on board for unity. Let's play some Peace Hammer. We're going to be on the same side. It's going to be great. The problem becomes with the second part of that identity statement is that they see the world in black and white. You are with me or you are against me. But the problem is when the rubber meets the road and the Stormcasts go out into the realms, things are complicated because they're always complicated. It's a life. But they don't really see it that way. And their preferred method of unifying things is by the use of brute force. In particular, paladins, which are essentially like the tankiest form of Stormcast on foot. So you think like decimators, retributors, that kind of thing. Which is why, if you play the Knights Excelsior in the game, you can actually take Paladin units as battle line, which is super fun. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I do it all the time. But I think more so than any other Stormhost, this has shown to be, I think a nice word would be problematic for the people that they are trying to protect. The Stormkeep of the Knights Excelsior, so kind of like their fortress within the mortal realms. They always have like an envoy or whatever in the realm of Azir, but this is like their in the realms kind of base of locations is in Gur, in a city called Excelsis, which has actually been talked about, I think, more so than any other major city in Age of Sigmar. They were first mentioned when the game launched. They were also in the book City of Secrets, which is a fantastic book that really well depicts the city. They were also featured in the Broken Realms series, as the Broken Realms Kragnos book specifically gave them rules and ways to interact as a city. Most recently, the book Dominion by Darius Hinks, which I cannot suggest enough because I love everything about it. The first, I think, 2 or 3 chapters is set in the city, and you're going to get a sense of the things we're going to talk about when it comes to the population fearing their protectors. But my point is, this Stormhost has been written about quite a bit. The city of Excelsis has been written about quite a bit. Now, what's interesting is that for a Stormhost that sees the world in black and white, they are in the worst frickin' place possible. By that I mean, the city of Excelsis has this giant shard of the old world sticking out of it. Okay, it's kind of like a giant crescent-shaped rock. And people found out a long time ago, if you chip a piece of this rock out, and you hold it in your hand, sometimes you get, like, mystical visions of the future. Sometimes they're very fragmented. It's not always what is going to happen. Sometimes it's what happened before. Like, you have no sense of it, but it's this swirling place of, like, prophecy, foresight. It's a huge, like, target for Tzeentch, which is pretty much the bulk of the book City of Secrets. It's a Tzeentch cult trying to infiltrate the city. Shards of Malice, this huge rock, feature prominently in the book Dominion again. But the thing is that the sheer presence of this thing, right? Building the city around this mystical rock formation was the whole point, and putting a Stormhost there to guard it, again, very important. But the problem is that it opens up a whole lot of gray. You might see a vision of chaos invading the city of Excelsis. And you might go to a, Stormcast on the street, you see a Knight Excelsior, and you go, hey, chaos is going to come and they're going to breach through this section of the city. Well, they're going to look at you and go, how do you know that? I have no way of knowing that you are not affiliated with them and maybe you just cowered out. Because they can't get inside your head and they can't see what you saw. And maybe you didn't use a piece of the fortune-telling stone. Maybe you just are in contact with chaos forces on your own, like you were doing illegal magics or something like that. So my point is, they would much rather just kill everybody who would ever use these things than have to deal with the complicated, like, who's and whys of all of their population just kind of knowing bits and pieces of the murky future. And so now we're going to start transitioning from, facts about the Knights Excelsior and move into what makes them so dubious. Because, like I said, unity is fantastic. If you're going to be, all these different races and factions, and I say races meaning Dwarven, Elf, that kind of stuff, all of these different, species together, everybody has to work together. Unity is the most important weapon that the forces of order can wield. But they achieve unity through violence. The Knights Excelsior have purged the city of Excelsis twice, if not 3 times, because it's been mentioned. There was one book that threw out a number that didn't seem right, but I'll have to find that again. But at least know they've done it twice. When Wrath of the Everchosen was put out there, it's a campaign supplement, they went through the various things, as they were detailing the prison that's holding Slaanesh. They were mentioning that basically Slaanesh acolytes have gone around the realms and instigated things to happen that will break the chains. One of which is defenders killing the people that they are defending. What they're referring to, the Knights Excelsior did a almost complete purge of the city because things got real rough in Excelsis. When they couldn't tell who friend or foe was, they killed everybody who wasn't wearing white armor. There's been at least 2 of these purges throughout the city. They are known as the Holy Destroyers, the White Executioners. The character we meet in the Broken Realm series is I think it's Lord Celestin. His moniker is the White Reaper. If you try to keep secrets, they'll kill you. If you engage in anything that could be interpreted as chaos related, they will kill you. There's a story from Malign Portents where there was an old city, like an outpost type thing, and the Knights Excelsior roll up to it, and their city's of Sigmar people. They're supposed to be friends and welcome in arms. And the Knights Excelsior look around, and they see that some of these people are sick with what could be Nurgle's rot. So, they bar the gates, and they kill all the people. It is a slash and burn strategy to achieve unity. more so than any Stormhost, they are utterly totalitarian. They deliver justice. Each one of them is a, judge, jury, executioner in one. If one of them goes out and just kills a whole squad of people and they say, "Oh, I detected some chaos," nobody bats an eye. And they have, of course, all the different tricks that all the Storm has to have. They all have Sacrosanct Chambers. They all have Draconis Chambers. They have all these kinds of things. Really, the most iconic is the Paladin. The guy marching with the giant hammer or sword or whatever the Paladin's wielding at that moment. But this mentality permeates every single one of them. And so that question that I asked at the start of the video, just at what point does a population become scared of its protectors, that is a core theme, I would say, of the first couple of chapters of Dominion. So in that story, I'm just going to super abbreviate it. You don't have to read it to be able to get this, and there's no spoilers for the actual plot line. This is just in the beginning stuff. The hero of the story gets one of these prophetic stones, sees a vision, and now they're trying to make it to the Sigmar temple to deliver this vision, this holy vision that they perceive, to the leaders there, but they don't want to show the Stormcast. And in fact, one of the characters is "Oh man, we're going to get so murdered for having foreseen some stuff," that he just pretty much crawls into a bottle for a couple days and just drinks his sorrow because he's just waiting. He's just waiting for the Stormcast to come and kill him. And those chapters to me are exceptionally important because you get a sense of what the population thinks of their defenders. That, they keep the wall safe, but every single person in Excelsis is walking on eggshells. It's not enough to live a good life. You have to live a life in which the authorities perceive you as being holier than thou, right? They're absolutely without blemish because they're so unyielding in their pursuit for unity and so ready to just pull the trigger and just annihilate stuff that everyone lives in fear. There's no discourse. You can't explain your position. Nothing. In fact, there's a story from Broken Realms Kragnos that I absolutely love. So in a section of that campaign, Skaven burrow up and they have the warp flame throwers and they're just dousing whole sections of the city in fire. Well, the Knights Excelsior, a bunch of Judicators show up, and that's the bow guys if you're not a Stormcast player. And they see the Skaven, and they look to the right, and they see their own citizens on fire, and they go, "That fire's green. It shouldn't be green. I don't know if it's going to corrupt and mutate them, but I'm not going to take the chance." So instead of shooting the Skaven, they shot their own people just to make sure that the people wouldn't run away and spread whatever they might have been carrying. So that's an example of containment at all cost of okay, so there's maybe an infection, but probably not on my own people. Better purge them first before we go after the source. It's just ridiculous. And I'm sure because they are so obsessed with unity and seeing things in black and white, to them, the idea that there might be civilians in their population who are possibly corrupted is probably a bigger affront to them and their sensibilities than the person who's clearly drawn the line of "I am an enemy," right? The possibility that these citizens might be infected or carry something or mutate into something is so much more egregious than the person who's just I'm just going to kill you. They understand enemies. They can't comprehend this sinister, devious gray that is people who just needed help, right? Some dude just was walking about his day and got doused in fire and then shot in the head with an arrow by his own protector. Monday vibes, am I right? And this is a theme that I love to discuss because it's one that only gets worse the more Stormcasts are reforged. As they get reforged, they lose more and more of their humanity. They become more automatons than they are people. And so things like this just get exacerbated. They get worse all the time. And so I'm going to end this video like I end all of them by simply asking, why is this cool? And cool might be sort of a strange word to use, but I think it's apt because to me, the best science fiction and fantasy are the ones where we have to ask questions that you and I do deal with on a daily basis. This is the problem in our society, no matter which country you live in. It always will be. The idea of our defenders becoming the source of fear for us is a timely issue at all points in human history. And if you're thinking about leaving a comment about that statement, I do not care. I'm going to prune these comments like I'm taking out a shrub with a chainsaw. But seeing it in this fictional setting where you have one force that comes into the equation, the Knights Excelsior, with a very black and white mentality, Purity must be achieved at all costs. Their mission is to save the realms, and part of that is making sure that things don't spread, that we are all on the same page working together, and that unity is achieved. Strength through unity. And that's awesome, and it's even noble. But when it comes at the end of a sword, that's when things get really rough, because the people in Excelsis do not have the autonomy to choose anything else, right? Like, it is totalitarian in the sense of they can't explore and then make a mistake and go, oh, you know what? Yeah, we shouldn't research that anymore. Like, just the fact that they made a mistake means they're probably going to get killed. But it also makes them compelling characters because I understand where they're coming from, and I understand from an aerial view why the way that they react to things makes logical sense, but it just undermines the entire point of coming in and liberating the realms from chaos, but only to be subjugated by people who can't, who can't see the gray in the world. It's black or white. And that's not a world that anyone really wants to live in. So ultimately, what's the point? I know this is something that I bring into my Path to Glory games, or I'm going to start, because I started or restarted my Stormcast list as a Stormkeep, and so I'm going to have human elements, and so it's something I really want to bring to the table of, like, how do these human auxiliaries work with Stormcast, because they don't trust them, they don't like them. Yeah, they're great to have on your side in a fight, but who's to say as that fight's going on, just like the humans who got doused with warp flame, they didn't do anything wrong, they were just chilling. And all of a sudden, the people that are on their side, the Knights Excelsior, take them out. Like, that fear has to be present at all times. And I think it's things like this where, very hard questions that we struggle with in the real world are put into the pages of fantasy and science fiction, that we are allowed to kind of explore them to the nth degree and see the points that, the kind of the perspectives that each side is bringing. I understand why Cities of Sigmar people are terrified to live under the thumb of the Knights Excelsior, but I also understand why the Knights Excelsior do the things they do, right? You can kind of gain some perspective from seeing the two different sides, but then step back and be like, this situation is messed up. Humans shouldn't be scared of their protectors. It undermines the entire point of trying to liberate these people from chaos. Even though I understand why all sides are doing what they're doing. When you add on top of the fact that this black and white nature can be preyed upon by their enemies, so like you have stuff like the Cruel Boys who maybe try to foster some, we'll call it moral gray amongst the human population, you get a recipe for disaster. Because imagine a Knights Excelsior, right? Let's say they have a war band and they're helping defend a Dawnbringer crusade. Cruel Boys roll up and they throw a whole bunch of hallucinogenics into the water. People start acting weird and wigging out. Knights Excelsior don't know why they're doing it. If any of them start going mad, they're just as likely to kill everybody because they don't understand what's going on, because they're not willing to reason and to chill out and to just let people be. The moment all of these cities' forces are not actively on their side, they have other things to deal with, like going insane from hallucinogenics, they become a liability, and so the Knights Excelsior just kill them. What an easy way to make your target fall apart, right? If you're the Cruel Boys and you're watching that happen, they're having a heck of a time, right? They're having the best day ever because they're watching all this stuff just devolve in front of them. And so you get these different layers of authoritative, demands from the Knights Excelsior, the simple human nature that is the Cities of Sigmar, and their want to explore and try new things, and maybe tap into some stuff that they shouldn't and should be reeled back in, but not by the sword. And then you have, on top of that, chaos, death, and destruction armies who can all manipulate that black and white worldview to their, kind of command. And what you get is an army of heroes who are trying to do the same thing through unity and strength and create this utopia, but because they're so mired in their own worldviews and ideas of perfection and kind of that flawed sense of unity that all Knights Excelsior have, and I say that flawed is in the sense of achieving it through violence, you get a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for fear and madness, and I think it just creates such compelling story bits, because again, it's something we can see sort of in the real world, to a much lesser extent, of course. I say lesser in the sense of no one's arcing in the lightning and stuff like that. So it's relatable, it's understandable, but it's just this kernel of like, man, I want to like you guys, the Knights Excelsior, but like, you're so bad, and I love it. It just makes compelling stories and characters and tensions between these conflicts that I love to read about. So I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of the Knights Excelsior? On the table, I think they're fantastic. I've always enjoyed playing as them. I don't always have paladins as battle line units. Sometimes I just don't bring paladin stuff at all. Regardless, I still find them super fun, and I have a great time painting them, so I'm going to keep doing it. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will catch up with you there. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time. Happy wargaming.